Hello, fellow audio nerds. I'm Steph, and this is Major Hi-Fi. Have you ever been so moved by a song or an album that you practically name your dog after it? My partner, her parents recently got a new puppy and named him Charlie after Mr. Charlie by the Grateful Dead. And also, John Grado was so moved by the White Album by the Beatles that he named his new headphones after them, the White Headphones by Grado. Now this week I got a chance to spend some quality time with them, and yeah, I was curious, how do these things sound? Will they be the right fit for who? Let's go back in time. I'll share with you my first impressions, and then I'll meet you right back here for my overall thoughts. Alright, here we go. Hey everybody, welcome to my place. And today I have with me the White Headphones by Grado, so let's see what's inside the box here. Alright, so as you'll see here, it's a super simple package. It's really just some documentation, a warranty paper here, and then the headphones. They do come with a 3.5mm to 6.35mm adapter though. Now, taking a closer look at the headphones themselves, they are larger than I thought they were. These ear cups, I don't know, based on the pictures on the Grado site and everything, they just seem like a larger headphone. The ear cups are made of maple. They're painted in this sort of like matte white finish and are really cool looking. It's like this really interesting mix between retro-ness and modernity, because like the edges around these are really clean. The way the Grado logo looks is super clean and good looking, but it still has that kind of like retro sort of look, and yeah, it's a really interesting design. I like the headband, the look of it. It's made of leather, it's got this white stitching, and it is thicker than other Grado headphones. You'll notice like the thickness this way, but also there's a little bit of extra padding on this headband than on some of the other Grados that I've tried. There's a little bit of flexibility here, not a whole lot, but a little bit, and then it connects here to these pieces to this metal extender then for everything. And then looking at the cable attaches to the base of the headband, or of the ear cups. It is firmly attached, soldered inside, so the cable is not detachable. And then the cable itself has a little bit of bulkiness to it. It's a good length though. And yeah, overall, these are really good-looking headphones. The ear cups are the G-style ear cups from Grado, so they've got they're just this uncoated kind of firm foam, but they look good, and putting it on my head, yeah, feels good. My ears do touch the ear cup a little bit. The ear pad goes like totally around the ear like this. Definitely goes totally around the ear, and the headband doesn't really have too much of a clamping force. It's pretty light, and it kind of makes the headphones feel really light. I mean, they're not a heavy headphone at all, really. I think the majority of the weight is just coming from that little bit of wood on the ear cups, which is hollow, of course, for the drivers inside. You've got dynamic drivers inside here, and the special thing about these drivers is that there's a special ventilation system in this headphone specified for the drivers. So yeah, it's a really good-looking headphone, and one that I'm super excited to take a listen to. So let's get into the sound of these babies. Alright, I was just listening to the song I'm Callin' by Tennis, and both the kick drum and the bass guitar felt a little bit elevated in the mix, but it was sort of in an interesting place. Like, they both had a lot of body, but it didn't feel super, super deep. The kick drum did have a little bit of feeling of extension to it, and that really helped to give it separation from the bass guitar. But yeah, it was sort of like in an interesting place, and it kind of gave the song this like more retro feel than it usually has. It's kind of cool. Super fun. Yeah, I was just listening to the song When It Was Wrong by the California Honey Drops, and the horns and the organ felt super nice and full. The drums felt nice and full too, but they kind of had like a softened attack to them. They still felt present, oddly enough, but their attacks were just sort of softened a little bit. And then as for the vocal, I could hear nice texture in the throat of the voice. It did have a little bit of body, but it was sort of softened a little bit too at the same time. And I could really hear the reverbs and the room sounds of the horns, of the drums. So it really kind of gave this song a cool feeling of life, and just a really interesting kind of, also sort of like a retroness to its sound is cool. Oh, yeah, I was just listening. The the high frequencies are really sound super cool, super aesthetically pleasing with these headphones. So the shaker, I was just listening to Quizás by Pink Martini. The shaker and the güiro both felt like super light and airy, really kind of pretty sounding. But then the hammers of the piano and then the sweeps of the strings kind of felt a little bit forward, like they had that extra kind of presence. The texture of the strings felt different, like it was softened a little bit, but it was very interesting. The vocal felt nice and airy as well. There's nice extension with it. So yeah, it's very fun high end. Wow, I absolutely love the soundstage of these. Now, I was just listening to the song Diamond Heart by Lady Gaga. The Rhodes at the beginning kind of feels farther, like further off in space, but yet still had kind of a sense of presence. The drums kind of had us that same sort of feeling, like this feeling of presence, but also just this really nice differentiation between them, the more intimate vocal, and then the background guitars and synths and stuff. I could really hear that in the depth, that differentiation very, very well. I really enjoyed the feeling of width, actually, with these headphones, the way that in the choruses kind of the wider synths came across. I wasn't so expansive outward that it was like, made it feel like everything was shooting outward, but there was this really kind of like interesting feeling of spatiality in the width, that had like kind of definitive borders, but that still had great separation and differentiation there. The way the synths kind of differentiated themselves from the other instruments in the space, just sounded really interesting, and yeah, it was super aesthetically pleasing, for this song too. So anyway, I am looking forward to spending more time with these headphones, so I'll meet you back at the Major Hi-Fi office with my overall thoughts. Alright, here we go. Overall, the low frequencies of the white headphones by Grado have this really interesting kind of retro feel. I heard a boost in the upper bass, somewhere between 100 Hz and 150 Hz, and what this did was it definitely elevated kick drums, bass guitars, anything kind of sitting down there in the mix level-wise, but it didn't really necessarily provide lots of feeling in the chest. So there was sort of a quickness to it, but it didn't feel like super deep. However, there was another boost around what sounded like 40 Hz, which kind of returned some of that deepness to the low end, but that kind of sat modestly in comparison to the boost in the upper bass, which really kind of brought to life a lot of harmonics, of low frequency rich instruments. So it was kind of interesting, and definitely had a different feel than a lot of other headphones that I've heard recently. Now, as for the mid-range of the white headphones, it also sort of had this sense of retroness to its overall feel. I heard a boost around what sounded like 600 Hz, which sort of brought room mics, reverbs, and the complexity of harmonically rich instruments kind of forward. It really kind of emphasized room sounds, emphasized reverbs. Additionally, I heard a cut around what sounded like 1 kilohertz, and this really kind of helped to create a lot of separation between the middle part of the mid-range and the instruments that were sitting more in the high mids. And then the high-mid response was really interesting, actually. Definitely had a lot of character. There was a boost right above that cut at 1K, so maybe around like 2 kilohertz, for example. And this sort of brought vocals forward a bit, but then that was followed by a cut between like 3 and 4K. And what this sort of did was give vocals, give other instruments with high-mid presence more presence. However, it still kind of maintained this feeling of smoothness that just kind of overall gave it this sort of like interesting retro feel, especially in combination with that 600 hertz boost as well. The high frequencies of the white headphones by Grado had presence and extension. There was a boost at the in the lower treble around 6 kilohertz, which really brought forward the attacks of drums. It brought forward the, piano hammers, horn stabs, really sort of brought out a lot of detail and snare brushes and that kind of thing. However, that was actually followed by a cut in the upper treble, somewhere between, 8 and 9 kilohertz. And what this did was sort of create a really nice feeling of separation in the high frequencies, but it also sort of softened the feeling of texture with the headphones. Then, lastly, there was another boost around what really just starting at 11 kilohertz and kind of going up from there. And this created this just amazing feeling of lift, this really nice sense of extension that affected the mixes as a whole and was actually really, really beautiful. Something I really appreciated about the headphones. Overall, I think the frequency response of these headphones is not something that's realistic, but it just has a vibe to it that is really, really great and super aesthetically pleasing if you're open to that kind of response. Now, the soundstage of the white headphones was one of the most interesting sound stages I've heard in a while, actually. It definitely had this feeling of nuance, it had a feeling of extension in all 3 dimensions, but there was some interesting stuff going on. So, for example, in regard to the feeling of width, the instruments felt nice and wide. You could definitely hear the particular placements of things. There was good differentiation between the notes. But the most interesting thing was that it didn't feel so expansive, like, for example, an Odyssey headphone, which just shoots sound outward. It didn't feel super narrow and compressed, but rather it felt like there were sort of like walls at a certain point, like here. And everything kind of fit within that in a really interesting way. It's even kind of hard to explain, but there was a really good sense of nuance and separation. Then, as for the feeling of depth, now the feeling of depth was also super interesting because obviously the frequency response really sort of contributed to the way that feeling of depth came through. So because of the way the high mids sort of had that presence and the lower treble had presence, it really kind of brought things forward. However, because of that 600 hertz boost in the mid-range, it really sort of helped to draw things backward. So there's sort of this feeling of intimacy and yet a definite sense of depth to it, which was really remarkable and definitely a unique quality to these headphones. And then lastly, as for the feeling of height, again, it was really well done. Lots of extension, especially in the high frequencies. There was still a little bit of extension in the low frequencies too, so it helped to make everything feel really nice and long. But then as for its general weighting, it really kind of was weighted more toward the top to my ears. But it was, I think that middle mid-range kind of emphasis kind of helped to elongate everything and kind of provide that extra weight down there. So anyway, very interesting soundstage, one that I thought was very aesthetically pleasing and interesting and contributed to mixes as a whole. Overall, the white headphones by Grado do this really interesting mesh of retroness and modernity in both its look and its sound. As for its sound signature, it's going to be best for those who enjoy a nice full mid-range as well as really pretty extended highs, rather than those looking for a bass head headphone or one that's more neutral. There's definitely character to these headphones, but it's a very aesthetically pleasing character and one that really kind of helps bring mixes to life. Thank you so much for watching. For another perspective on the white headphones by Grado, check out the link down below. I've left a link there to my colleague's review of the same headphones. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And for more videos like this, be sure to subscribe. Alright, I'll see you next time. Bye!